Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Nile.
And I fucked up.
You did?
I fucked up.
Oh, yeah, you did fuck up. You told me about your crimes before we started this episode.
I have to admit to a crime, which is I had every intention to cover this entire topic in 2 parts. I lied. I lied about it. That's my crime. And they're putting me in jail for it. I am being locked up. After this concludes, no more Kyle and It Gets Weird. You're going to have to find a new co-host. Who's replacing me?
I've got some feelers out to Mark Maron and Justin McElroy. I'm going to see which one is offering a better rate. And see which one I can kind of swap in. And I also I honestly might just do some like revolving door guest hosts, you know? Because really, I'm the draw here. So like that.
Wow.
That's really the kind of thing, the thing that everyone I think understands. You know, like
okay, so you're thinking like maybe every once in a while you get like Conan on here.
Yeah, you know, give Conan a little bit of the It Gets Weird rub.
Larry King's dead. Just
Is he?
I forgot. Yeah, I think he died.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure he's dead.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure Larry King died. So we're gonna have to dig up that corpse, get him on the show.
We're gonna have a hologram, which it's we're gonna go through with the hologram for a podcast, even though there's no visual representation.
We're gonna be the first podcast to have the Larry King hologram. You're gonna have to trust us on this one.
And we also have it's the phrase Larry King Vocaloid just went through my head, and I feel like I kind of cursed the world by saying that phrase. But
oh my god, that would be great.
What late show did Hatsune Miku play on? Was it Larry King?
I feel like it was Letterman.
I think it was Letterman. Okay,
because there's a video that's long been in my YouTube favorites of somebody editing not Larry King, Jesus, Letterman, which I think came from that particular episode of basically Letterman and Hatsune Miku having like a lost love for each other, and like
oh yeah.
So I'm pretty sure it was on Letterman. And let's see if we can maybe get sort of a Larry King, if we can like take his vocal samples, which of course there's tons of them.
That's the nice thing about a late night host is that we have audio of them saying
every goddamn thing. So, you know, get that rev up that deep fake technology. See if we can get Hatsune Miku on the project, and we can get Larry King back just how we always loved Larry King.
Yeah, my co-host from going on is going to be alternating Larry King hologram, and also Hatsune Miku.
So you're gonna have to kind of get this on, you know, I'll get this shit on the pipe for me while I'm in jail somehow, because I'm gonna want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Want to see?
I'll slip it in.
Yeah,
I'm gonna put flash drives inside of
smuggle in an iPod Classic with some like Larry King hologram Vocaloids.
I'm gonna put the It Gets Weird archives on an iPod Classic for you.
Oh, dude, no way to make me more insane.
The only thing you have to listen to is yourself talking about
Jesus
things.
Christ. Is that what Sartre was writing about in No Exit?
I think so, yeah.
Oh my God, this is part 2 of my parapsychology thing, and you know what? I'm just gonna get into it.
Okay.
And I'll kind of explain myself and my crimes as I go along. So in our last episode, as you might remember, we covered the beginnings of psychical research, better known as parapsychology. And it's this idea that would later be formalized in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as parapsychology. Um, and where we kind of left off was there's English, American, French, German, these researchers of varied backgrounds and beliefs kind of coming together to form these psychical research societies, right?
Yeah.
The American Society for Psychical Research, France's Society of Physiological Psychology, London Society for Psychical Research, and the German Society for Experimental Psychology. Um, uh, Now we're moving into the late 20th century, is where we're going to kind of start with this one. Something I found as I started to dig into this era of parapsychology that I just want to kind of mention up front here
Okay.
is that some would argue that there was legitimate work being done within these oddball groups. Like, it's a pretty well dismissed mark on the history of psychology.
Okay.
Uh, but these ideologically eclectic organizations with these varied and often clashing backgrounds, there would actually be people involved with this stuff and these societies who would actually make I don't know whether contributions is the right word, but they were kind of. Basically, they contributed to early psychology and they've kind of become overshadowed by history and the nature of parapsychology being this sort of dismissed thing.
Yeah, but
right?
hey, Edison found what, like 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb before he found the
Sure.
one way to do it.
Sure.
Even scientific foibles can lead to something good. So I think these people are heroes. I think they're braver than the troops.
Well, okay.
And we're good to go. Wow, that's a good thing, right? That's very topical considering it was just Memorial Day.
Yeah, and you're very, very brave for doing that because you have no idea.
No, these fellas, we're gonna get through this and it's gonna be like scandal.
Yeah.
There's gonna be both like a scandal and a controversy and just like a racism tab on the Wikipedia.
I have good news is that I actually haven't run into there is controversy, but not in the sense of also that this parapsychologist was a horrible racist. They may have, but I didn't run into anything yet. We'll see. But it was a very brave thing for you to do nonetheless.
Look, it's a joke. We make jokes here on this podcast. It's a fucking jokey joke
That's true.
podcast.
And the good thing about jokes and a joke podcast is you can say anything with no repercussions.
Yeah. Oh, good.
So I just wanted to introduce this by saying, hey, some of this was legitimate, even though a lot of it isn't. So I have here an interesting little thing from a 2012 paper written by Dr. Andreas Sommer on the subject called Psychical Research and the Origins of American Psychology. I bookmarked a bunch of this person's stuff because they seem to be putting some pretty rigorous academic research into this history. So there's a whole bunch there. And anyways, here's something that I found in a paper that is interesting.
Okay.
At the end of the 19th century, psychical researchers such as Frederick and Arthur Myers, Edmund Gurney, Julian Ochorowicz, Charles Richet, Max Dessoir, Albert von Schrenck-Notzing, Richard Hodgson, and Henry and Eleanor Sedgwick, who I've mentioned some of those people, were actively involved in the making of the fledgling science of psychology. Psychical researchers initiated and organized the International Congress of Physiological/Experimental Psychology, and they devised methodological innovations such as randomized study designs. They contributed important empirical findings by conducting the first experiments investigating the psychology of eyewitness testimony, empirical and conceptual studies illuminating mechanisms of dissociation and hypnotism, and experiments and large-scale surveys undermining the notion of dissociation and hallucinations as intrinsically pathological phenomena. While rooted in attempts to test controversial claims of telepathy, clairvoyance, and survival of death, these contributions enriched early psychological knowledge quite independently of the still hotly debated evidence for supernatural phenomena.
Okay. I the things that I pulled from that, which was a lot of scholarly speak,
Sure.
is basic. There's the fact that these people kind of led the charge on some aspects of trying to determine authenticity of crowd reporting.
Yeah.
is interesting. Like that's a place that I could totally see this kind of research leading to actual progress. Where it's like, because whenever you're dealing, we look into this stuff a lot when you're like looking at eyewitness accounts of either UFOs, paranormal stuff, whatever. There's a lot of variance, and like
Yeah.
finding why that variance might be happening, how much you can count on any specific account, and the corroboration between accounts is an interesting thing to try to like parse.
Yeah.
So people doing like legitimate research in this field, I feel like they could have some like, I can see them having making some strides in that kind of research.
Yeah, and what's funny to me too is like when they approach these things from like with by attempting to approach it in this scientific manner, which to be completely fair, not always done very well.
No, like, yeah.
But we'll kind of get to some of that. Um it's funny that like as far as it diverging into like reality and real academic stuff, it eventually just becomes the early parts of psychology.
Okay.
So it's like there is a persisting psychical research and parapsychological like idea that is still like there are organizations around the world who still do that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the stuff that was like legitimized by these people in the early days is ultimately just psychology.
Okay.
And not like paranormal stuff.
Okay. So
right?
it basically got taken mainstream effectively.
Yeah, there's a lot of like and especially when we like when we eventually someday talk about the American parapsychology
Sometime in 2024.
someday I'll get to what I'm about to explain what I just said, but basically like they like groups would splinter off and people would also like I'll get to it a little bit here, but like at the Psychical Research group in London,
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of spiritualists involved in the early stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually they left. A lot of them left because they were like, you don't believe in this stuff. They don't like the skeptic side of things who want to approach from this like more scientific angle.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's kind of a divide between the scientists and the
yes.
spiritualists.
Which and so I guess the point that I'm making is it seems to me, and we'll get into it again in part 3, but the way it kind of looks to me is that it splinters to the point where you diverge into just psychology versus just the paranormal aspect of this like parapsychology idea, which is pretty, it depends on whether or not you believe it, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So yeah, if you want to read that paper, it's available for free in the online archives of the U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health. And I think if you find this stuff interesting, it's worth reading. But it primarily concerns actual contributions to psychology. Whereas I'm more interested in covering paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
So, but I thought it was at least worth mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
While the field is controversial, it's not totally bunk what it produced. So, and here I'd also like to briefly explain how I'm going to cover this second episode on the history of parapsychology and probably what this is going to look like in episode 3 and moving forward. I just because like I don't know. I'm laying groundwork here, I guess.
Okay.
So as you reach the late 19th century, the study of parapsychology becomes a much more global phenomenon. I was kind of worried that last episode I made it sound like it was like a uniquely like Western and Western European thing. That's not true at all. You could have entire episodes about parapsychology in China, Russia, Italy, Brazil. Like you get the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of in the first one covering places like major places where parapsychology was being developed at the time, but it wasn't really the full picture. And down the road, this isn't going to be like part of part 3, but down the road, we can have episodes that are just about the different places where they develop different parapsychology stuff. Like I know Russia has a lot going on there. But I kind of was like, there's no way I can cover it that broadly.
Yeah.
There's too many things. I would be going on for far too long. 3 parts is already crazy. So I funneled it down.
Good.
And I funneled it down to England and the Society for Psychical Research, because that's kind of an origin point. Like, a lot of places kind of take notes for, like, the societies that came after them. A lot of them are modeled after how they kind of initially did it. In fact, one of the co-founders of the Society for Psychical Research, like, went to America to help establish the American version of that.
Interesting.
So,
okay. So this is kind of a jumping off point for a lot of other places.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Germany does things a little differently, so I'll have to save that for a Germany episode. So it's a whole thing. But I'm personally looking forward to getting into all the different, like, global contributions to parapsychology in future episodes. But for now, we're going to talk about England.
Okay.
So and just on a little more to add to that. There is a lot of interplay among, like I said, the Western researchers and these spiritualists and psychologists in the Western world. And so it's very foundational. So this is also where we get a lot of investigative practices and research subjects, which is primarily what our episode is about today.
Okay.
So with the founding of the Society for Psychical Research in 1882, we've got some key players who, some of them I've mentioned previously. In particular, we're talking about Sir William Barrett and Henry Sedgwick. So Sir Barrett was fully convinced of the supernatural powers of mediums, which I guess sort of stemmed from his belief that he had this, like, steadfast belief that there was life after death.
Okay.
And he'd, like, I guess, bared witness to some practicing mediums that had convinced him. And so he was like, all right, cool. So I'm on board for this paranormal shit. And then he spoke with Sedgwick, who was eventually considered co-founder and appointed first president of the Society for Psychical Research in London. That guy was a little less of a paranormal, like, full-on, believer. He was an actual professor. He was a professor of moral philosophy at Cambridge. And I think a little more skeptical than, at least based on how people kind of describe him.
So we have our Mulder and our Scully here.
Yeah.
We're setting up that dynamic.
Literally imagine if Mulder and Scully developed basically a school for researching paranormal phenomena. Basically.
That's my fan fiction.
Exactly.
I'm working on it. I'm pitching it to
Yeah.
pitching it to some publishing houses as X-Files meets Harry Potter. But without the controversy that surrounds J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling's not involved in your X-Files fan fiction?
No. Well, I'm saying I'm lifting the kind of school thing. It's
Sure.
like a school for children.
But there's no.
It's like
a school for children.
It's a school. It's a parapsychical school for children.
Okay, that is a little similar. There's a school in Harry Potter, so I would maybe tread carefully.
No, it's a completely original IP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to that when you really get it out on Archive of Our Own.
Look, if Percy Jackson is fine, then I'm fine. We're good.
I think you'll be okay, especially since it has absolutely no relation to wizards or magic or any of that shit. So I think you'll be all right.
But there are ghosts in both of them.
That's true. That's true. That's a little bit of rum.
Yeah.
We'll talk to our lawyers. Now, what's interesting is Sedgwick, despite being this, like, more level-headed's not fair. I guess skeptical.
Skeptical, but man, he flies off the handle immediately. This guy's got some anger issues.
Well, they do kind of talk about him as being level-headed.
Okay.
They describe him as that, but he's like a little more skeptical. But he does have this connection to an organization that some kind of refer to as a predecessor for the Society for Psychical Research, and this is a thing called the Ghost Society of Cambridge.
Okay.
Which I didn't dig too deep into. I don't think it was like they were, like, trying to, like, academically, like, solve, like, paranormal stuff. I think it was just, like, a club of people who were interested in that kind of thing, is kind of the impression I got of it. But Sedgwick was actually a cousin to the founder of the Ghost Society of Cambridge. And here I have a little.
I think it's Cambridge.
Is it Cambridge?
I believe so.
Okay. Well, there's another member of the Ghost Society. This is a guy named Frederick W.H. Myers, who was a scholar, a poet, and classical scholar and poet.
Is this the guy that we talked about last time that I was like, we really got to get the poet involved in this thing?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Look, most important member of the society, in my opinion,
is the poet.
Got to keep the arts and the parapsychical research.
It's kind of like how the United States has a poet laureate. The Society for Psychical Research has a poet in.
Oh, I think the arts are very important to education and reality, and should be much more stressed than they are in our current educational system.
Yeah.
But in this aspect, I still think, like, keep the art alive in this kind of stuff.
You don't think a guy who like writes limericks is going to be good at like determining like the like whether or not the claims of table tipping are veracious?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times ghosts like to have these little tricks or little there's these like this kind of outside of the box thinking when it comes to like solving a ghost's puzzles.
And you're saying poets are in the box.
I'm saying poets can think outside the box and can have the kind of artistic mind to make connections that are basically if TV's taught me anything, is that if there's you have to bring someone in from an outside field that doesn't seem like it has a lot to do with what you're trying to get done.
True.
And they're going to be able to do it better than literally anyone who's actually devoted their life to doing that thing.
That's true. But you do have to consider the now well-established technique in that ghosts employ called the poet's trick, where they have tricks designed to trap poets and keep them from finding the truth. So
fair enough.
He's gonna have to work a little harder than the philosopher.
So maybe the philosopher can help like counter the poet's trick, and then the poet can help counter the philosophical ennui that persists when you find out ghosts are real.
Yeah, and we teach all these counter spells at the Mulder and Scully School of Parapsychology,
of not witchcraft and wizardry.
Yeah. So Myers becomes a pupil of Sedgwick, the philosopher and co-founder, and they are good friends. Which this is where we get these descriptions of like, I guess Meyer was like a very emotional and impulsive kind of guy, and here it says that Sedgwick is like cool-headed and cautious.
This is literally a casting call for a TV.
It really is. It really is. It's pretty funny.
Art imitates life,
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so with these funny clashing personalities, that they are also like establishing this importance of studying the paranormal. And they kind of had this idea that they were like going to test mediums who I guess could produce like weird physical effects in darkened rooms.
Okay. We talked about like the tipping table trick last time and some of that kind of stuff. So you're talking about like other effects as well?
Yeah, I get into one in particular that I even have photos of. I don't know what specifically it was that they were like, we need to like investigate that.
Mm-hmm.
But these people had a lot of weird tricks that they could get up to. I mean, we talked about the guy who like had like the slate tablets that he somehow convinced this 19th century astrophysicist was genuine, even though we find out later that it was a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
And hey, here's another problem with parapsychology, especially in this early stage. There's a lot of stuff where it is basically like academic older men being fooled, like consistently fooled. Like it's kind of silly.
I'm gonna take a time machine and introduce the Parapsychical Society into Penn and Teller's Fool Us.
Yeah.
What do they call that show?
I know what you're talking
about. Fool Us.
Fool Us. Yeah, we watched that one time.
Yeah,
it's kind of
a fun show where like a magician comes in and I love the way they try to communicate. Oh yeah, no, we know how you did that, because it's always like, I think if you did it, they like it's almost like someone talking about like fucking the name, like the fake movie names for con jobs, where it's like you did like a Huckster's Paradise into this or that, and it's like And they're like, yeah, that's it. And they're like, gotcha. It's really fucking funny. I don't know if this is anything, but that show's fun, and I would love to see them try to like Penn and Teller these mediums.
A lot of these dudes in this early parapsychology could stand for a visit with Penn and Teller. Yeah. Honestly. So what happens is, as they're like investigating these mediums, this is before the society's established, but they're like investigating this early investigations into mediums basically show them a bunch of frauds. They basically are like, there was so much fraud that they weren't sure they were going to even continue looking into the phenomenon.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's what happens before, and so that's kind of, I guess, what ends up leading Sedgwick into Barrett and them having that like meeting of the minds and establishing the Society for Psychical Research. So in the early years of the society, they had a lot of research that was pursued by active members of the council. And this was done primarily by people who were not spiritualists, even though there were a significant number of spiritualists brought into the group at the start. And because of this, early on, these spiritualists became unhappy with the skeptical side of things being the primary motivating force for research.
Cue Job with the magicians that we demand be taken seriously.
Yes.
Picture.
Yeah, basically. So they were just like people who and I guess I didn't see, like, it doesn't dig too deep into like what those like arguments looked like. It makes perfect sense at the end of the day. You bring all these like academics in, you bring artists in, you bring philosophers, you bring spiritualists who believe that there is life after death and you can talk to God through mediums. Like you bring these people in, and I feel like as soon as that like these people must have just been like, this is like trying to deconfirm my like faith. Like,
yeah.
So I'm guessing that's kind of what it was like. They're just like, no, we have to go and believe this. But if you go into something like this believing it, your mind is more closed off. You know, you're less likely to be open to alternative explanations for the phenomena.
Did you ever come across a case of one of the skeptics investigating one of the spiritualists involved in the society?
Ooh.
A little like internal investigation?
Well, I don't think that. I think there is something like that later, but it's not even in this episode.
Okay.
So I'll have to keep that in mind.
I feel like that has to have happened at some point in the history of these societies, where it's like one of the spiritualists is like, no, look at all this stuff that's real. And one of the skeptics is like, nope, fuck you. Not real. I'm going to tell you why it's not.
Yeah, they really Neil deGrasse Tyson their asses.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of the controversy with all these psychical research societies is just a lot of fraud.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So a lot of the spiritualists leave the society pretty early on, and this leaves Sedgwick in charge of basically everything. And it says here that prominent among the latter was Edmund Gurney, a friend of Myers, and an expert on hypnosis, and then Sedgwick's wife, born Eleanor Mildred Balfour, whose brother Arthur would later serve as prime minister and foreign secretary, took an active part in society affairs for many years while pursuing a successful career as a mathematician and later principal of Newnham College, Cambridge.
Okay.
And then we have her personal assistant, Alice Johnson, served as the society's secretary. Another active early worker was Frank Podmore, who I think I mentioned on the last episode, an Oxford graduate and expert on the history of spiritualism, who became a trenchant skeptic of the reality of most psychic claims. So these are kind of the people now running the show, since the spiritualists are like fucking off, for the most part.
Okay. Sounds a lot more stuffy than the spiritualist version, but I'm with it.
Yeah. Now, at the outset, there were 6 different committees that were assigned to basically research different specific areas.
Okay.
We have the Reichenbach Experiments, Mesmerism, Thought Transference, Apparitions and Haunts, Literary Committee, and physical phenomena of the seance room.
Isn't Reichenbach where fucking Sherlock Holmes died?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Reichenbach is just the name of a guy who proposed some theory for paranormal phenomena. And they kind of expand on his ideas, and that's like what leads the research for this particular section. Um, so yeah, let's talk a bit about the research reported by the Society for Psychical Research.
I'm really curious if this has any tie because
Is it a
Sherlock Holmes like dies by falling over the Reichenbach Falls.
well, you know who was involved with the Society for Psychical Research?
Arthur Conan Doyle?
That's right.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle?
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I believe also I saw places saying that Sigmund Freud was also involved in the American side, I think, or not American side. He would be
German, maybe?
I don't actually know. Is he French? German?
Sigmund.
I feel stupid. I don't know.
Sigmund sounds like because like that sounds like a name in fucking Wagner. So
supposedly somewhere involved with European parapsychology.
Makes sense.
But that may not come until later. So we have the Reichenbach experiments, which maybe that's related. I really don't know.
It's a good name. You could have just lifted it from this.
It could be. Well, it comes from this guy Baron Karl von Reichenbach, who died forever ago in 1869. So like we're multiple decades removed from this guy at this point. But this guy had developed a theory about the paranormal, and this was based on claims that sensitive people could detect lights coming from magnets.
Interesting. Okay.
So, using a strong electromagnet in a darkened room, the Society for Psychical Research Committee, I'm going to call them SPR, by the way.
That's fine.
Just to make that easier. They could not themselves detect any lights. However, a young hypnotist, G.A. Smith, and one of his subjects supposedly was able to do so. Oh, and I should clarify that the things that I'm about to tell you are the reportings from the people in the Society for Psychical Research.
The SPR. Gotcha.
The SPR. The magnet was turned on and off at irregular intervals by an inaudible switch in an adjacent room. Most times they could tell when this occurred. Although ostensibly a physical phenomenon, this might have been attributed to extrasensory perception.
I'm also curious if it was... This is totally me just fucking throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Sure.
But that kind of thing could lead to a kind of high frequency sound that older people might be less likely to be able to hear. So like the psychical research people are typically going to be older academics that have lost a lot of their high frequency hearing just from aging. And you say it's a young mesmerist or whatever that could hear it or that was able to detect this stuff. They might have literally been able to hear the electrical current.
Maybe that's true. I didn't see anything in this research suggesting that. And there is a lot. We will get in. One of the things we're going to get into in part 3 of this is a lot of the fraud and alternative explanations for the things that they were talking about. But that's interesting. I don't know.
There's a hum that comes from electricity if you don't have good grounding, and even in America, and it's dependent on the voltage that's being used. And it's so like I'm purely fucking spitballing here.
Maybe you bust this like over 100-year-old case of hypnotism and psychic powers wide open.
Yeah, but
Think about it.
This might be one of those situations where because of my background, I'm everything looks like a hammer to me. You know, solving every problem with audio.
Yeah,
but whatever.
So yeah, this person could supposedly like tell when they were turning this light on and off with the magnet. And they said that it could be extrasensory perception. Reichenbach's ideas were not further pursued, and the issue of possible physiological effects of strong magnetic fields on humans has passed to the domain of conventional science. Which that does come from the mesmerism thing, if you remember from the first episode, where like the guy was like rubbing down their patients with magnets.
Right. And eventually he realized he didn't need the magnets anymore.
Speaking of,
oh fuck yeah,
the Committee on Mesmerism. They found that they could produce in some subjects many of the phenomena previously reported, including immunity to painful stimuli, the induction of hallucinations and false memories, and amnesia for what had happened while in the hypnotized state. So, like, they're doing mesmerist shit
Mhm.
and testing it out. Like that guy who was using magnets and waving his hands around and just like, which like I think a lot of what you get from this is like there is a lot of like psychological states that can kind of be induced through suggestion.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately where this all comes from. And that's why mesmerism ultimately becomes hypnotism. So
Yeah, your brain is easily tricked.
easily persuaded, easily tricked. Yeah. Edmund Gurney contributed many such observations to the SPR's proceedings. Having once aroused skepticism and derision, these phenomena are now considered normal psychological reactions to strong suggestion, the business of medical authorities and professional psychotherapists. So that's what the Department of Mesmerism ultimately was touching upon.
Okay.
So now we have the Department for Thought Transference, or I guess the committee, sorry. The Thought Transference Committee initiated tests of telepathy, as it was later called. And they were basically forerunners of the methodologically uh, superior modern research, is what they say here. An agent would be given a target picture or subject to concentrate upon while a percipient screened from sight or in a different room would attempt to draw or describe it.
Yeah. That this is a thing that I feel like has persisted into like the CIA experiments in the like 40s through 60s.
Yeah.
When was all of that stuff?
Yes, parapsychology is in fact involved and related to, I mentioned it last time, but
Mhm.
Project Stargate,
Yeah.
for instance, and I think a little bit of MK
Is
Ultra.
Stargate what's the name of the one that Men Who Stare at Goats is based on?
Stargate.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
Stargate.
So like the idea, we would probably talk about this almost like remote viewing.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's what I was thinking.
and that's what they were trying to do in Project Stargate, which we covered.
We've covered it in a couple different
It was a long
places.
time ago when we covered. I don't know which episode, but I think it was in the 100s where I covered that one.
And then it came up again on some of my Mars stuff.
Yeah,
because
which
people tried to remote view Mars.
Yes. Yeah. And I think a little MK Ultra, which is even further back. But I think now that I'm remembering it, I think that I may have covered. I think that maybe the episode where I covered Project Stargate was when you were sick.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. I don't remember. So yeah, they're like concentrating on this picture and they could draw or describe it without seeing it. And they go on to say, without modern statistical methods, the likelihood of a resemblance between target and response being more than coincidence could not be quantified.
Fair.
If the targets were not selected by some random process, correspondences might occur through agent and percipient having similar trains of thought. Successful performers were exceptional, leading to suspicion of dishonesty, covert signals, or prearranged conspiracy. Which
Fair.
I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but in part 3, there is, in fact, an experiment with, I think it was Sedgwick himself. We'll get into it, where it was literally later found out that it was just exactly what I just described.
That makes sense.
And they fooled them for like 7 years.
Jesus.
So this is part of the reason why parapsychology kind of gets totally dismissed.
Right. Because it is like, it's so hard to quantify something that we don't have, like, there's no meter for
right.
it. You know, like people who can use stuff in ghost hunting, whatever, but like there's no sensor that you can put on someone and have it register remote viewing.
Right.
So
right. And a lot of this too is just presupposing that something is happening too, or otherwise they're just investigating frauds. Which there are a significant number of people involved with the society whose like entire thing is like, I want to expose fraud.
Yeah.
So, the setups were often far from what would now be considered adequate. Nevertheless, the target response resemblances were difficult to imagine occurring by chance, and the checks in force in some of the successful sessions were of a standard to satisfy a court of law. Now, let me pause here and say, I should probably say this, but this talk of their research is basically coming out of a library, an encyclopedia of modern day psychical research people.
Okay.
who are
So
basically
people who are doing this in modern times are saying that the methods back then were basically beyond
yes,
reproach. Okay.
yeah. Um, uh, Nevertheless, the levels of accuracy achieved, however, are hardly ever reported today. The committee carried out successful telepathy tests with the children of, I think that's a school, Rev A.M. Creary,
Okay.
or maybe that's a reverend,
Yeah,
uh,
Reverend A.M. Query probably.
as agents and percipients. When their powers started to wane, they were caught in crude signaling and confessed to having occasionally cheated previously. Although it was difficult to see how all the positive results could be explained by fraud, the research was discredited.
It's difficult. It's not difficult. The kids
It's
made it up.
literally kids making it up. Like, there's literally kids who like they're like talking in the research of like, well, we have to prevent them from like coming up with like a signal to each other
Mhm.
so that they can't like trick us. That's literally what they do.
Mhm.
They
You have to make
literally,
better signals.
and it's just so crazy.
Yeah.
Telepathy tests were carried out with G.A. Smith and his hypnotized subjects, often with Smith as percipient and one of his subjects as agent, both in the same room, but the agent in silent contemplation of the target. There was striking success with imagined objects and with two-digit numbers as targets. The results were thought convincing, although they were hardly more than chance when agent and percipient were in separate rooms. Use of an undetected code was thought unlikely, as this could have implicated Smith, whom the researchers considered to be a colleague.
Okay. That's not the scientific method. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things where like if you go down a list of like dings against them, it's always just like your methods were just so not
Yeah,
there.
you put so much trust in a specific person when you always have to look at like what does someone get out of this, the result of this thing. And the case here is like the people doing the research want the research to turn out to be true because it helps them.
Yeah. It's I mean, and honestly, it's you're doing the a cop told me they saw the UFO, therefore I believe it sort of defense. Like that's
Yeah.
what that is essentially. You're just sort of for some reason deciding that there is a heightened sense of trustworthiness just because of the person's status. Um in 1908, a friend of Smith's, a journalist named Douglas Blackburn, who years earlier had acted as a particularly successful unpaid participant, published a statement to the effect that he and Smith had used a code.
Duh. Yeah.
Smith vehemently denied the allegation, and good grounds were found for believing him.
What were they? These guys were friends?
I don't know. The affair drew attention to the need for both experimenters and subjects to protect themselves from accusations of fraud.
Yeah, this is why today a lot of things are double-blind studies.
Right, right. So there was just like their control of like the tests is just very minimal at best. They just it's pretty abysmal, unfortunately. So we have the Committee on Apparitions and Haunts. They claim to have recorded firsthand accounts of unexplained noises and phantoms and premises said to be haunted, but they never reached any conclusions.
Okay.
The literary committee took this further. Gurney, Myers, and Podmore interviewed numerous individuals who reported an exceptional experience of hearing voices or seeing apparitions. They were struck by the relative frequency of cases with the, quote, death wraith variety, when the experience heralded unexpected news of the death of the person in the vision, usually someone close to the percipient. So for me, this is my reading on some of this early haunting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Before we had like, people could like bring cameras and things into a place and record like
themselves shouting at ghosts.
Yeah, like I hate to say it, and I think this is also another like early UFO abduction thing, but I really genuinely feel like there's a lot of cases that can come down to sleep paralysis.
Yeah, well, there's that, and like there's a whole thing of people's brains tricking them into thinking that they like it's the same thing that makes you think of like coincidences and stuff like deja vu,
Mhm.
where like when you see something, your brain will like retroactively make you think
Fill in yeah.
like we'll take something vague that you thought about yesterday and like fill in the blanks to make it so it's related.
Yeah.
And I think like especially if a lot of their successes are death wraiths, I think there is some element of like that kind of thing happening where, oh, I had a bad feeling yesterday. That means that I knew that they were going to die today,
Yeah.
and that's not really true.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of good psychological explanations. One of the things I actually ran across that was kind of interesting is, oh Jesus, I'll get into it in part 3 some more too. But there was like this guy who was basically demonstrating the tricks of psychic mediums,
mhm.
and how it plays on like people's psychology and stuff. Like he literally does a cold read and just is like like so quickly able to, you know,
Cold reading is
it
fascinating.
it's so funny.
Just because it's literally just observation and like and thinking of like knowing the odds of things.
Yeah.
You're basically betting on people's responses to your questions.
Yeah, there's an entire you can actually like go to you can go to school to study the psychology of like people who believe in this stuff.
Yeah.
Who believe in like psychic and paranormal phenomena. I forget the term, but there was a guy who was like sort of able to demonstrate because his entire field is like talking about the psychology of that stuff. It's very interesting. So
Hmm.
maybe we wouldn't have something like that if it wasn't for the parapsychology people. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
Um the death rate. They sought corroboration by verifying the time and circumstances of the death and by finding persons whom the percipient had described the experience to before hearing of the death. They then formulated a 3-part theory. First, the experiences are a form of hallucination. Phantoms leave no physical traces, such as open doors or displaced furniture, and usually occur when the percipient is alone, often in bed at night.
Hmm.
Second, they're veridical, that is, they carry reference to something not otherwise knowable that cannot be explained as mere coincidence. Third, the phenomenon is one of resonance, what would later be dubbed telepathy, between the minds of the percipient and the dying person.
Okay.
So their theory is that there is a psychic link to these dying people. They are somehow like privy to this like previously unknowable information, but the phantoms that they're seeing are hallucinated. Like they're going, which I guess is sort of implying like the percipient is going to see it, but like a researcher may not see it
Yeah.
if they're trying to conduct some sort of study and like they happen to be there like when a person witnesses a ghost. So they're operating on the assumption that a phantom is purely hallucinatory.
I do like this line that these people are drawing where it's like, oh, telepathy, that's real, but ghosts, fuck no. Hallucinations.
Well, it's like I said, it's almost like they're treating ghosts as being a real phenomenon,
yeah.
but they're like trying to be like, well, there has to be an explanation for why people are doing this. So it has to be psychic connections.
Yeah.
Like, it's like they're making some leaps for sure.
It's honestly the opposite of a Gordian knot situation, where it's just like the simplest solution is the cleanest.
Right. We're going to go for the more complex version of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Many such cases were published first in the Proceedings and later as a collection in a large book. Their first major published like book on this subject called Phantasms of the Living.
Okay. That's a good title.
It is. It is. The response to this research was mixed. Critics noted the absence of accounts of impressions written down before their fulfillment, which they say is a deficiency still evident in modern cases.
Yeah. For like death wraiths and stuff, that no one like has like written accounts of seeing the death wraith and then the person dying after that fact. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
This may be due to a number of things: lack of motivation, the personal nature of the experience, fear of being ridiculed, and now a lost habit of writing letters and preserving notes.
Check the texts.
Yeah. Why don't you Saw Ghost, why don't you rip open a textbook about it, bud?
Oh, I'm saying like literally like texting. Like nowadays, just fucking.
Why don't you,
if I have a death wraith, I'm texting somebody.
Yeah. Why don't you fucking text me about your ghosts?
Facebook message me your premonitions.
Yeah.
so that we
Your
can
own
verify
ones.
them to our parapsychical society.
Now, why don't you text me your death wraith experiences anymore?
I promise you that if I ever have a death wraith, I will text you
Thank
about
you.
it.
I appreciate that. And I would text you if I saw
Good.
it, which is why every other day I seem to be texting you all these weird experiences I've been having.
Frankly, I put them all in a folder because it's a little worrying, honestly, and
Yeah.
it puts my day off to a weird start.
Yeah, I may be haunted. Well, I don't know. I might have to find an exorcist. Uh, Now, here's another great part of this that I really love. An ambitious census of hallucinations followed. Volunteer collectors gave friends and acquaintances written questions. The first asked if they had ever had, quote, a vivid impression of seeing or being touched by a living being or inanimate object or of hearing a voice, which impression was not due to any external physical cause. More questions followed if the response was yes. To counter bias from volunteers seeking out likely positive responses, some whole groups were questioned, such as all the members of a household, including the servants, or all members of a committee unconnected with psychical research. After answers suggestive of dreaming and such like had been eliminated, it was found that 9.9% out of 17,000 replies were affirmative.
That's actually a pretty wide study.
Yeah.
For the time.
This is
Wow,
what they're
okay.
kind of talking about too, where it's like they were kind of like early on to these like big studies like this.
Yeah.
They like we can't say they did nothing to contribute to the I don't know, academic rigor, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Just like scientific scale, you know?
yeah. The researchers were interested in corroborated cases of hallucinations coinciding within 12 hours of the death of the person seen or felt. After making allowances for uncertainty of timing and for non coincidental cases having been forgotten, they calculated that this eventually occurred significantly more often than could be accounted for solely by chance. I you know what I remembered? This is
Hmm.
when I was reading about this, I was like, I do remember that like the night after the funeral for my grandmother, I did have extremely terrifying dreams.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, it did kind of remind me, like I didn't have visions, obviously,
Yeah.
but like I'm just trying to think like if you had the kind of dream that I'd had back in like 1890 or whatever, you might you might think there was something fucking crazy going on.
Yeah, like I get.
It's before psychology is like really an established thing, you
Yeah.
know? Like, sorry, I didn't mean to
Before
interrupt. But,
before people start making men will do all of this stuff but not go to therapy jokes, you know?
right.
It precedes all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just funny. And it's like, yeah. So they didn't have somebody to tell them, oh, all you're freaking out about, it's just psychological.
Has the phrase "that's all in your head" been invented yet?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. We got to look up whenever that one was coined. Um, uh, so after making allowances for uncertainty of timing and for non-coincidental cases having been forgotten, they calculated that this eventuality occurred significantly more often than could be accounted for solely by chance. The census brought to light two other types of occurrence: coincidences unrelated to serious crisis and cases of phantasms of persons long dead. The latter might suggest survival of deceased minds, although reported visions seem seldom to extend beyond what the recipients might imagine. Another section deals with collectively perceived apparitions, those seen at the same time by more than one person. Here, it was often found that an apparition might be seen by only one person of several who were present, and in cases where two or more claimed to have seen it, it was hard to determine how similar their impressions had actually been. So this is kind of like why they came down on the line of like, it's a hallucination.
Yeah.
It's hard to verify when there's more than one claiming to have seen it, but in gatherings of more than one person will have seen something where everybody else did not.
Yeah. So I get why you would make that claim out of all this stuff. It's funny to me how they're like telepathy is pretty possible, but ghosts, nah.
Well, I guess the thing is, and they're not calling it telepathy at the time.
Yeah, I know.
But like, yeah, they're it's just funny because they're just assuming that when somebody's like saying, I was in a room full of people and I saw a ghost, they're just assuming, okay, well, if that's true, then they're probably hallucinating.
Yeah. Do you think these people would have figured out the twist to the Sixth Sense before most other people?
No fucking chance.
Okay.
No chance whatsoever. They would have. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I, I think they're a little too wrapped up in their like, ooh, how can I make paranormal stuff less cool by like, I don't know, making it academic.
Yeah, how can I make this boring? How can I make like seeing ghosts feel boring?
Yeah,
That's
exactly. That really, and hey, that makes me so much more confident in covering this topic. Let me tell you.
fair.
No, I genuinely find it interesting that they tried
Mhm.
and failed.
But ghosts are dope, so they can't succeed to make them fucking
That's true.
suck.
Ghosts are extremely cool. Whereas parapsychology is just, yeah, it's just
It's for
literally
nerds.
it's for nerds. It's for the fucking birds and the nerds. Now we have the Physical Phenomena Committee. And what I really like about the start of this report is that it says they reported that they found nothing of evidential value.
So this was the place to go and chill. You didn't really have
Yeah.
to like do a lot.
Yeah, this is like that retail job that you take in the mall like
Yeah.
10 years ago where like nobody ever comes in and you just kind of like chill behind the counter with your feet up. Basically, that's the equivalent of that, but you're looking for ghosts.
It's like the like kind of data entry office job that I got one summer where
Yes.
I watched all of Spider-Man the animated series.
Yeah, it's
And
that.
also all of Reno 911.
Wow, that sounds like a good job.
Yeah, I literally had to like walk around downtown Columbus like once a day to pick up mail and drop some stuff off, and otherwise I was just like doing stuff in spreadsheets, and I had Netflix running.
Hell yeah.
That was just my entire that was my
Pretty
summer.
sick. So some years later, the SPR became interested in the medium William Eglinton, who produced spirit messages on enclosed slates in the presence of those for whom they were intended. So this is the same thing that the other guy, whose name I fucking forgot, but I talked about on the previous episode, the guy who was disproven by magicians for being a total crook.
I don't remember the name,
I'm
but
sorry,
I remember
it was like
about.
Slade or something. It was
Yeah,
like,
Slade was one. Slade was a name you gave me. Last
something
time.
like that. But you'll know if you've listened to the previous episode. This guy had these like this like spirit writing that would appear on these like metal slates that he had. That's the guy, the astrophysicist, who is just like, oh my god, this guy's creating spirit writings, and somehow never thought to like check that he had like. I don't remember exactly how the trick was done, but I know that there were like layers to these slates that he could like move around and stuff. So, yeah. So that's the same thing that this guy's doing. Researchers concluded that this could be explained in terms of conjuring and distraction. So literally, like, either he's like putting it there in a way that like it's like I forget one of the ways that like the other guy would do it is like he would even sometimes like put chalk in his like in between his toes, or like he would have it in all these different places that he hid them. Like I think in his butthole, in his penis hole, in all the holes you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
And he would just like write it like when essentially like when people weren't like paying attention to him. Which I don't know how that works, right? Like I'm trying to imagine how you have this like controlled study, and what is he doing? He's just like, oh my god, look over there, the spirit. And as soon as they turn away, he's like fucking right. Like I don't know how it works, because
they never like checked handwriting samples.
I really don't know.
I don't think handwriting science was a thing at that point, but
It's just so funny that like I don't know how the fuck these people got fooled by this shit.
yeah.
On this topic, the SPR also attempted to evaluate reports from the past. The medium DD Home had been credited with effects more dramatic and better attested than anything available to the SPR then or since. Particularly impressive were accounts by William Crooks of experiments in which, in good light, he had measured a force exerted by Home on a balanced plank shielded from touch. So you could like use a force push or something on this plank.
Yeah, okay. Interesting.
Which I don't know exactly how. We'll kind of get into this, but it did make me think of how was it Uri Geller? It may not have been Uri Geller, but there was a guy who claimed to be a psychic who got embarrassed on national TV when a skeptic was able to show the exact process by which he pretended to like move objects, which was that he had a very steady stream of air coming out of his like I think out of his nose or something, where he could, or maybe it was out of his mouth, but he would like kind of like pretend to push objects with his mind. And the skeptic steps up and he's just like, oh, really? That's interesting. And he sits down and immediately is able to replicate it. And he's just like, yeah, so I was blowing that with my mouth.
There you go.
So it's kind of what makes me think of. Crooks contributed original notes of his experiments with Home to the proceedings, as also did Earl Dunraven, a young aristocrat who had befriended Home. Home mixed in elevated circles, and many noteworthy persons and famous scientists witnessed phenomena in varied venues and conditions of lighting, such as accordion playing with no one touching the keys, and objects moving on their own. He was also seen to handle glowing coals and apparently cause heavy furniture to levitate.
Okay. I mean, some of those are more interesting. Like, a lot of these things that they're looking at have been very basic, but levitating like couches and shit sounds fun.
Yeah, this is what they mean when they talk about physical phenomena. Is like we want to find out how this is working. And I mean, I don't have the specifics of like what this guy did. This is all just like based off of like notes that these guys took, and supposedly he was able to like lift furniture. But like we already established that like people have setups where they can like make tables float with secret setups on their feet, with their hands, with the ring. Like they have a bunch of different methods.
Just imagine this guy having like fucking quads, like iron on his legs, and he's just able to like put his foot under a couch and lift it up with one foot.
He's just table lifted. That's what they were doing though.
Yeah.
That's the kind of shit that these people did. Despite the strong skepticism of the SPR's leaders,
strong thighs of these people lifting up furniture. Jesus.
I'm just like, the thing is that when you think about it, they must have had people in this like crowded area or so. It must have been like a whole hubbub, because like what I'm picturing is a guy in a room and we have like, here's the control couch.
Yeah.
And we'll just set you here. And he's just got his foot underneath and he's just like, whoa, look at that shit. It's moving. He's just very clear. Like, I don't know how you fucking fake that in front of supposed researchers. I just don't get it.
Well, your researchers have to be kind of sloppy.
Yes.
And you just have to practice.
And in some cases, predisposed to want to believe.
Yeah.
We'll get more into the disproven and how that stuff went down in the next episode. But it's just
I can't wait for this fucking card tower to come crumbling down.
It's so crazy to me, like that it just seems too easy, like
did anyone ever like steal their nose? Do you think they ever researched that?
Yeah, they fucking Barrett, Sir Barrett. They got your nose, Sir Barrett, and Barrett's like, "Oh, give it back." Yeah, and that was they never actually gave his nose back. And that's actually part of why he had such a strong interest in researching mediums. He wanted to get his nose back. See if somebody could pluck his nose back out from the
spirit realm.
The spirit realm.
Yeah, Jesus.
So despite the strong skepticism of SPR's leaders regarding the claims of physical mediums, the organization agreed to carry out an investigation of the Neapolitan medium Eusapia Palladino, a figure who had been endorsed in investigations by scientists in other European countries. The series of seances carried out in Cambridge in 1895 revealed a strong tendency by Palladino to cheat when the controls were poor. In 1908, this impression was largely reversed by a second SPR investigation carried out in Naples by three experienced and initially skeptical investigators: Everard Fielding, Hereward Carrington, and W.W. Bagley. Those names are fucking made up, man. The three produced a detailed and frank report in which they explained how they had reached the conviction of having witnessed genuinely paranormal phenomena. So they're initially like, wow, this person's fucking cheating in our tests.
Yeah.
And then a group of guys come back later and they're just like,
no, she's the real deal.
She's the real fucking deal, guys. I don't know what we were talking about.
I think at that point you would get a rubber match and you'd have to have a third test, you know?
It's just it's so sloppy, boys. Other development, this is my favorite thing, by the way.
Okay.
Other developments tended to confirm the views of SPR skeptics. In 1914, a distinguished German psychiatrist, Baron von Schrenck-Notzing, who we've talked about before, involved with a lot of this stuff, but the German side of parapsychology. He published a lengthy illustrated book on materializations by the medium Martha Barrett, known in the literature as Ava C. So she has an alternate name.
Mm-hmm.
These ectoplasmic extrusions took the form of human faces draped around her head, images that demonstrably matched photographs in published magazines.
Interesting. Okay.
When Barrett was later tested by SPR investigators, the findings were quote unquote inconclusive. But I have photos of what she was saying were these purported like ectoplasms that she was photographing. So if you want to see, here's two good ones. Can you kind of see that?
I think so, yeah.
In the first one, you can very clearly see there is like a woman's face in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second one, she's sort of like almost like vomiting it out. Which they're right to assume that they were when they found out that they were magazine photos.
Mm-hmm.
That was when they were kind of on the case of debunking this whole thing.
Look, if you start like puking out cover photos for Time magazine, then you might be raising some suspicion.
Yeah. So the last section, the last sort of focus of research that I want to bring up before we wrap this one are mental mediums. These are mediums that are just totally crazy.
Okay.
No, just kidding. Mental mediums give information verbally or through automatic writing about their sitters' intimate affairs, usually in the guise of messages from deceased relatives.
Okay, yeah. I know what you mean now.
Yeah. So some mediums go into a preliminary self-induced trance and on awakening recall nothing of what they may have said or written. This is the classic like pop culture idea of the medium. The SPR began researching such mediums in the last decade of the 19th century, and this continued to be its predominant activity until the 1930s. The Boston medium Leonora Piper, who had been discovered by William James, was paid by the SPR to come to England in 1889, staying first with Oliver Lodge in Liverpool and then in Cambridge. Kept under surveillance and presented with anonymous strangers, she had surprising successes in many of her sittings. This was the start of a long collaboration between the medium and the SPR. When in trance, Piper spoke with the voice of one or other spirit control, who managed the proceedings. The researchers satisfied themselves after numerous tests that the trance state was genuine and that Piper was in a genuine altered state of consciousness or dissociation. But they equally found the control's claimed identities to be improbable and considered them rather to be unconscious constructs of the medium's imagination.
Okay.
Reports followed of sittings with various gifted mediums. To counter the possibility that sitters might unknowingly give away clues, sessions were held with a proxy who was ignorant of the absent client's circumstances. So, supposedly well-attested examples of veridical, quote-unquote, communications became so prevalent that they were often seen by investigators as impossible to explain by other than one of two paranormal alternatives: as communications with the surviving spirits of the deceased, or as an extended form of telepathy clairvoyance among the living. SPR researchers were interested in trance phenomena that occurred in other contexts. Edmund Gurney's studies of hypnotic trance demonstrated how suggestion could send sensitive subjects into a hallucinatory world in which they would assume alien identity and behavior with no recollection of having done so when aroused. Closer to when they got real horny.
Look, I realize that comes off like I'm fucking 12, but it was funny.
Hey, if people didn't get that impression of us now, then I don't know. I think nothing will.
Just like the fact that it's just like, oh, they can't account for it when they get horny is just really funny to me. It's
all right. You're remembering this alien body you inhabit, this alternative mental state. Now hold on a second. All right, now get in there and I don't know, rub her shoulders, real sensual style. Okay,
that's
how she gets real horny.
Okay, all right.
Oh, I've forgotten. I'm so horny. I can't remember.
A nice shoulder rub. I gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm with it.
Closer to mediumistic phenomena were cases of what in the 20th century was referred to as multiple personality and is now termed dissociative mental disorder.
Okay.
So they they did stumble upon a disorder that they thought was telepathy.
Yeah. So, man, dissociative identity disorder and stuff is one of those things that's like such a. It's one of those things that has most noticeably changed in my lifetime, like in terms of our understanding of it and
Yeah.
everything, and how we talk about it.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
it's interesting to be like, so they think mediums weren't just like, I'm sure some of them were just like making shit up and being
Oh, yeah.
frauds, whatever the fuck. But it's enough of them ended up possibly having this condition that it led to almost like a not a full blown diagnosis for it or anything, but like it led to people trying to like founding the foundations of what we now know as an actual mental disorder. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Following psychotherapeutic probing or as a consequence of psychological trauma, some people radically change their style of talk and behavior, manifesting a new identity, distinctive autobiography, and referring to their normal self as a different person. These identities may alternate over shorter or longer periods, and the changes are more than could result from mere play acting. In rare cases where a medium fails to emerge from control by a communicator, she becomes temporarily or even permanently possessed.
Hmm.
The classic case of Sally Bucamp, studied by the American psychiatrist Morton Prince, has been frequently cited in SPR publications. And I gotta cut it off there.
Okay.
Because those are the primary committees and like areas of research that they looked into. This would change over time,
Yeah.
but from this like time period of like the 1880s to the early 1910s, these were the kinds of ideas that they were running with.
That makes sense. Like a lot of these are all like pretty what I would consider core parts of like paranormal experience, you know? Like it's a lot of kind of basic things that would make up a lot of what we would consider paranormal phenomenon today.
Yeah.
Other than like there's no like haunted objects as much or anything like that kind of falls
Occasionally,
under a couple
yeah.
things here that we've talked about, but
Yeah.
I that gets more into full-blown paranormal research less so than the like psychical side of it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, interesting.
So that is part 2 of our part 3-part episode. Look, I really did want to contain it, but I didn't know how, Nile.
It's fair. I look, sometimes it happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just have to talk about, super soldiers for 3 weeks and you have to talk about the origins of psychology.
Yeah. Yeah, Jesus, I think no, Alex
No,
Jones
you've
was my
done-
first 3-parter.
yeah.
That's right. Oh God. Well, this is a more fun 3-parter than Alex Jones.
Yeah.
So that leads me to the big question. If you're
What you got for me?
Of all the listed supernatural powers that I discussed with you today, which one would you most like to have and why?
I really like the being able to like move shit with your mind. I think that's fun.
telekinesis type stuff.
Yeah, it would make moving really a lot easier.
Yeah,
it like
maybe get you a part on Stranger Things, eat more easily.
I do think I would find if I had that ability, I would be able to find work in Hollywood pretty easily.
Yeah.
Because like it would make like special effects a lot easier.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, I think that would be kind of the one that I would most gravitate towards, just because it like it's good for pranks. Like being able to move shit with your mind, you can really do whatever.
Pull a chair out from under somebody with nobody knowing who did it, except when they see that it was done by an invisible force, they're like, "Well, it's my psychic friend Nile."
Yeah, I mean, look, you'd have to keep it quiet. You'd have to play that shit close to the vest, or else your pranks will get very old, and your friends will probably get mad at you for pulling so many chairs out of them and causing irreparable spine damage.
Yes. Yeah, just breaking tailbones.
Yeah, I'm gonna speed run you into walking like Matt Hardy. It's just but yeah, that would be where I would go. I like the idea of being able to move shit with your mind.
Okay, I like that. That's honestly probably the correct answer. I would want to be able to spit up ectoplasm. Like if I could just like vomit up like otherworldly goo on a whim. I don't know. I don't know what I would even do with that. I just think it would be like a fun thing to have. It's like, you go out like on a date or something and you're like talking about like your mutual interests, like, oh, I just read this great book. Like you just fucking spit up in front of them. And they're like, whoa, this shit's glowing and it's oh, feel it. You can feel an otherworldly power surrounding it.
You're gonna be a real hit on Tinder.
Yeah. That's guaranteed to get you at least a couple dates with the right people. You know, like
You're gonna have to put in like what you're looking for is like people into like looking through oddities shops.
Yeah.
You know, if you're into collecting bleached bird bones, hit me up because I've got something you'll be interested in.
Hey, if you're the Tumblr witch who dug up graves and stole human bones, hit me up. I have something to show you. We might hit it off.
Yeah, that's kind of your new target audience,
you do
which isn't that far
narrowcast.
off of your current target audience.
You do end up kind of narrow casting there,
Yeah.
I guess. But that, I don't know, it'd be like fun. Like, how cool would it be to like
Be able to puke up
ectoplasm?
That I think our definitions of fun are a little bit different. I don't like puke. For someone that is as like
Yeah.
deep, one of the core tenets, if you were
That's-
building your Sims, like, you know how when you're making a Sims character,
Yeah.
there's like 3 slots that kind of define the base of their personality that then branches out. Fear of puking would almost be one of the core tenets of Kyle.
That is true. And I guess in my mind, I'm sort of envisioning like a voluntary like spit up mechanism that I don't actually feel.
Okay. Yeah.
Which
like a
may
baby.
Not,
You just
yeah. That's what, think how fucked up what that would be. If like I can't like shoot it out or anything, I just like
kind of gurgles
gurgle
out.
it over. That does kind of change the tenor of the whole showing that off on a date.
You're gonna have to. Hey, can you burp me?
Can you pass me the table? I don't like throwing up. That is genuinely a thing that I hate doing, and you're right. And so that's why in my special mind palace version of it, I don't feel like I'm throwing up. I feel like I'm like a venomous reptile that shoots something from its venom. Like it.
You basically are looking for a venom sac of ectoplasm that you can just like spit on people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And maybe I could get like a cobra like hood to go with that ability.
Yeah, your neck just flares out.
My neck flares up and I spit up.
Fuck me.
Oh, Jesus.
Look, I will use my telekinesis to give you a towel once you start spitting everywhere. So
thank you.
That'll be how I help you.
Dude, you could you could like float bowls and like we could like see if we could like land.
We're gonna do trick shots around the apartment.
Yeah. That'd be fucking awesome.
Oh fuck.
Well,
check out that YouTube channel that will be starting in 2023.
But I think that wraps this one up unless you got something else to add.
No, if you want, let's take care of some business.
Yeah, part 3 coming next week.
If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can go there at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird and we're probably there.
Email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. We love to eat the emails. I need the fuel and energy of eating those emails so I can spit up more.
Yeah, you got to replenish that fucking ectoplasm.
That's
sack.
right. You want to fill up my sack? Go ahead and email us. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. If you want to hear more bonus content from this fucking podcast, go check that shit out. We got a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, we have a show called It Gets Weird TV where we're talking about weird TV shows. Right now, we're in the middle of Gravity Falls Season 2. Listeners actually get to vote on what show we watch. We put a couple up. People vote for them. And so we're going to finish up the second season of Gravity Falls on there. And at the $5 tier, you get that show plus another bonus show on the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So you're getting bonus content every single goddamn week at the $5 tier. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to our main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. You get access to our Discord where we're hanging out. And you get access to giving cool money to your favorite podcast.
Yeah.
And then we also have a $1 tier that's just a tip. You don't get anything out of it. You're just saying, hey, I like your show. Here is a tip of $1 a month. And we say, thank you very much. We love that $1 tip. We're passing the hat around and you just toss it in there, and we really appreciate that. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast. Congressman will be on this show this year.
We don't want them on the show. We want them to listen to the show.
We want them.
Confirmed.
That's what I meant.
We need confirmed congressman
yeah.
listenership of It Gets Weird in this calendar year.
Yeah, please. So somebody make that happen. We know it's got to be possible.
Someone who listens to this has to have ties to a congressman. Annoy your like weird uncle that you don't really talk to, who's like a congressman of like Idaho or some shit.
Yeah, for real. And like show them this like this last segment. Be like, yeah, they're really into congressmen. Check this out. So
yeah, Jesus. All right. Well, on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you all for listening. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Nile.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.